Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Startups. Actually, this is going to be the last episode for season one. We've gone 12 episodes strong, and we're very grateful for that. And we're looking forward to what season two has to offer. On today's episode, we're going to bring something special as well, and we're going to be talking about diversity and inclusion and how startups can build that by default. So it's not when you're turning over millions of pounds or you become a well-known organization. That is when you start thinking about start building diversity and inclusion within your business structure. And there's no other person that can speak on it than the diversity and inclusion man himself,
Oh God.
the chief executive of the Equal Group, none other than Mac Alonge. So Mark is going to be talking about what it means to be a diverse company, and also be giving advice to entrepreneurs on how you can start doing that even now. So hi Mark, how you doing? Okay. Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of the Startups. Actually, this is going to be the last episode for season one. We've gone 12 episodes strong, and we're very grateful for that. And we're looking forward to what season two has to offer. On today's episode, we're going to bring something special as well, and we're going to be talking about diversity and inclusion and how startups can build that by default. So it's not when you're turning over millions of pounds or you become a well-known organization. That is when you start thinking about start building diversity and inclusion within your business structure. And there's no other person that can speak on it than the diversity and inclusion man himself,
Oh God.
the chief executive of the Equal Group, none other than Mac Alonge. So Mark is going to be talking about what it means to be a diverse company, and also be giving advice to entrepreneurs on how you can start doing that even now. So hi Mark, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for that intro, man. I feel flattered.
I just give you guys a bit of a disclaimer here. Mark and myself, we've gone like way back. Our
Definitely.
friendship has been like since the 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really happy with what he has done and what he's building. And I think this is something that every company now has had to pay full attention on. Mark, I was just listening to Dame Vivian Hunt's statement about building a business that serves everybody, that serves all your
Mm.
stakeholders. Gone are the days where a business just serves the interest of their shareholders, who are the ones that appoint the board. But now a lot of things have come into bear that are now affecting the bottom line. So, for example, how you relate to the environment, how you treat your employees, these
Mm.
things begin to matter because your customers are making decisions based on this thing. So before we go into the weeds of the conversation, from your perspective as a diversity and inclusion man, what is your definition of diversity and inclusion?
Very good question. So I think for me, like we as a company, we always refer to things as equality, diversity, and inclusion, because without looking at it through a multi-dimensional lens, you're likely to miss elements. So equality is the philosophy or the principle of being equal in regards to access to certain opportunities, the way that you're considered for certain things, um, the way that your views are put across, so that equal consideration. Diversity is obviously we are all different, whether that's visually, whether that is intellectually, whether that is experientially. We've all been through different things, we've all had different things happen to us. So that is, looking at diversity looks at all of those things in context, and then the inclusion element is looking at things in the context of equality, diversity. Inclusion is just the aspect of feeling included in something. So whether that's an organization, whether that's society as a whole, whether that's a family, feeling included in the family, there's certain things that can add to your feelings of inclusion or distract from them. So really looking at things holistically to see what is the situation, what is an organization like, what is an office or even looking at things like software, how inclusive is software if only people that have good hearing can engage with it, only people that have perfect vision can engage with it. It limits you in relation to how many people can extract benefit from that.
Amazing. So when you're talking about the equality, diversity, and inclusion, it's not just a race thing. Is that's my
Oh hell
understanding.
no. No, it's not. And I think the funny thing is that a lot of people just assume that I'm talking about race because I'm obviously black. Um, you know, I've been black my whole life, and I think so for those of you that don't know, my background is in the energy sector, and when I was in the energy sector, I didn't really think about race too much. I didn't really think about equality, diversity, inclusion too much initially. You know, I came into the sector and I straight away realized that it wasn't diverse because I looked around. I was the only black person or one of a handful of people. Everyone was really old. Everyone was really middle class. Everyone was just presented in a certain way. And for somebody that doesn't present in that way, you know, you notice it immediately.
Yeah.
But I didn't see it as something that I personally needed to tackle. I thought that it would just get better, you know, over time as people come in, as leaders change, it will naturally get better. And then I spent 10 years in the energy industry, and it didn't naturally get better, because the thing that people don't realize is that culture is active.
Mm.
It's not something that you can passively hope that, you know, things will change, things will get better. You have to be active. You have to actively pursue equality, diversity, and inclusion, because it's so easy for us to just look at things through a narrow lens and to just consider what is easy. And equality, diversity, and inclusion isn't easy. It's not. I would be a liar if I sit here and said, you know, you can do it with your eyes closed. It's super easy. It's not. It's challenging.
So
So it's
what are
about.
those challenges? What are those challenges that people face when it comes to pursuing equality, diversity, and inclusion? What are the bottlenecks? What are the roadblocks? Why is it a difficult thing to do?
So a lack of insight, a lack of lived experience. So I only know what it's like to live as a black man
Mm.
in Britain. You know, I've spent most of my life in this country. I don't know what it's like to live in this country as a black man that was born somewhere else. That's not my lived experience. I don't know what it's like for somebody that's part of the LGBT plus community. I don't know what it's like for a white woman, a white middle-aged woman, a white middle-aged woman with kids. I don't know that lived experience firsthand. So in terms of the difficulty, it's a difficulty that comes from a lack of familiarity. So because I don't know somebody's experience, that limits me or inhibits me to a certain extent. And really it's about getting past the initial discomfort to say, how can I engage with somebody else's lived experience? And you do that relationally. You do that through questions, through time. You know, it comes by really developing a sense of empathy for somebody to say, you know, if I enter a building, for example, and there's a flight of stairs, it's easy for me. But somebody that's not able-bodied, I would have to put myself in their shoes to say, actually, if I'm a wheelchair user, how do I access this building in a way that is easy, is straightforward, and doesn't cause undue stress or undue discomfort? But really, it's about developing a sense of empathy that, as a society, we're not very good at, because we've been trained, educated to be quite self-centered, quite selfish to some extent. I think for the most part, we think about ourselves first and foremost. And even relating that back to what you're saying earlier about race, I think for the most part, we position ourselves to say, as long as I'm doing all right, I don't necessarily have to worry about the general experience. What's often said by people within a racialized context is, you know, if the system was so broken, certain people wouldn't be able to elevate to their positions, you know, so therefore the system works and it's just the individuals, which is again an inaccurate view of kind of some of the barriers that we face when looking at equality, diversity, inclusion. But yeah, I guess in relation to kind of your specific question, the barriers are stepping outside of our comfort zone. You know, how do we engage with people that we're not familiar with? And there's sometimes a fear there, that we will say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, and everybody has that fear of being called either a sexist or a misogynist or a racist or a homophobic person. So again, we need to have a certain amount of sensitivity around the way that we broach topics, but again, we have to be bold sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Amazing, amazing. I mean, I think from what I'm hearing you say, it's about stepping outside of your own reality and seeing and kind of trying to understand other people's experiences and understand what life is for them. But in terms of translating it from an idealistic perspective into some form of a realism, or in terms of how it impacts on the bottom line, how does that? What's the connection? How does diversity and inclusion or equity or equality, how does that impact the business bottom line?
Yeah, so there's tons of research out there by McKinsey, by Accenture, by Harvard Business Review, the Parker Review, the McGregor Review. There's so many reviews and case studies into how beneficial equality, diversity, and inclusion is for organizations. One of the things that I always say is that actually, if you've got clarity in terms of what you're trying to achieve as an organization, there's no way that equality, diversity, and inclusion will hinder you from achieving that. Unless, and this is an important caveat, unless your intention as an organization is to be racist, discriminatory, or abusive. If those are your intentions, then equality, diversity, and inclusion isn't for you. Everybody else, there is a business case that supports equality, diversity, and inclusion. So, for example, if we're making cars and we want to sell as many cars as possible, obviously the world is very diverse. So you need to understand how different people engage with your brand, what kind of issues different people might face. So, for example, if you've got disabled users, putting in adjustments that allow people with disabilities to buy your car. And the way that you market it, the way that you present it is going to be appealing to different people. So being able to really segment your customer base and understand what is it that this community wants, what is it that that community wants. But then also more generally, just being more robust in the way that we make decisions. You know, I've got a lived experience, I've got a specific perspective. If I was to go out and hire somebody that had exactly the same perspective, exactly the same life experience as me, the incremental improved decision making that we're able to do is that, you know, the saying is two heads are better than one. That's not going to be the case if the two heads are exactly the same. You know, if that person has exactly the same perspective as me, the exact same lens as me, I might as well just make this decision on my own because they're not adding much value. But somebody's got a completely different perspective, completely different lived experience, completely different skill set. You know, the two of us are going to make a much better, much more robust decision than just I could have by myself, or just me and a clone of myself. And you see it in day-to-day life when you've got, and I don't want to turn this into a political conversation, but looking at the political elite, you know, the Tory middle class, mostly white individuals that have had one narrow perspective and that are making decisions for such a diverse community. Decisions around COVID, decisions around exam results, and they've just made a complete hash of it. And a lot of that is down to the fact that they all think the same, they went to the same schools, they went to the same universities, they all had the same upbringing, so they've never had an insight into what it is to be an immigrant, or what it is to come from a single parent family, or to all of these other things that are just normal to so much of the population.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, well, for looking at it from a I mean, that would make sense for a political system, a social dynamic system, or even a multinational corporate system that is serving a diverse group of people. But when you're looking at a startup where agility is important, right? Being able to make quick decisions is important. Being able to react to the market quickly is important. Can diversity become a bottleneck?
Can it become a bottleneck? Probably, but I doubt that, because you mentioned something there about kind of making quick decisions and being agile. And as startups, we need to get to a place where it's not just about speed, it's about efficiency. So if you're, and there's kind of an image that we typically use with some of the training that we do and it kind of splits the brain into two sides, two systems of thinking. One is your impulse thinking, one is your more proactive and conscious thinking. So unconscious versus conscious. And unconsciously, we make snap decisions all the time, and that is good when the decisions are meaningless. So, what color socks to wear today doesn't matter. Just make it unconsciously. But when you're talking about things like direction of travel, when you're trying to be strategic, when you're talking about commercial decisions, you really need to engage your conscious mind and take a step back and maybe spend a little bit more time on those kind of decisions, because those decisions are going to be the more significant ones. And the more insight you can build into that decision-making process, the more different perspectives that you can consider, the more robust that decision will be. So it's not just a case of making quick decisions, it's about making the most
Smart
efficient,
decisions.
optimal. Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense. And but what do you think? Do you think that some of the attempts at addressing equality, diversity, and inclusion are a little bit superficial? So, for example, having a black face on your leadership board, or having an Asian face on your leadership board, or having a female on your leadership board, so that you can address, you can reach out or seem what's it called politically
Yeah.
correct to these people, or seem familiar with these people, but not necessarily that those voices are being taken into consideration. Do you think do you sometimes feel that way, or do you feel that these are sincere actions, not just to placate the public?
Yeah. You're going to get me in trouble a little bit because I speak on this all the time. But to a certain extent, we need to people call people out on their nonsense. And as an organization, one of the things that we always say that it's not just about representation, it's also about experience. So just having diversity in the building isn't an achievement. Any multi-million pound company can go out and hire black faces, or go out and hire women, go out and hire disabled people. It's not a challenge. The real challenge is making those people feel, not just feel, actually be included. So actually be part of the organization, feel that their voice is heard, demonstrate that they have the same experience as their white male counterparts, as their white female counterparts, their able-bodied counterparts, their counterparts that are heterosexual if they're part of the LGBT plus community. And really it's about identifying and resolving those disparities, because there are disparities in experience. When I walk into a building, and I do this all the time. So since I left the energy sector, I refuse to wear suits. So I walk in, dreadlock guy, not wearing a suit, just dress down occasionally as well. So dress down, and automatically there's looks. The security guard will look at me like, "Oh, what's he doing here?" And the receptionist will be like, "Oh, what's he doing here?" And it's that that kind of level of experience to say, what is the experience when you're outside the norm in relation to microaggressions? People asking where you're really from, people assuming that you're something that they've seen before, something that assuming that you're a rapper, or assuming that you're a basketball player if you're a black person. Those kind of little nuanced behaviors are the fundamental indicator of what progress has been made or not been made. You know, just having representation isn't, for me, isn't a big deal. I think we need to challenge organizations and challenge institutions to go further, to say, show us the level of data below the superficial. So superficial level, what does an organization look like?
Mhm.
Below that is, what does it feel like? And then you can start to pick out some of the aspects of equality. So how much are black people paid versus white people? How much are women paid versus men? How much are able-bodied people paid versus disabled people? And when you get to that level of detail, you then start to understand nuance. And then you can start to dig a little bit deeper to say, if you are from an ethnic minority background and you happen to be a woman and you happen to be part of the LGBTQ plus community,
Mhm.
what is your experience as contrasted with the experience of a white middle-aged middle-class man? And when you can do that level of analysis, that's when you can truly understand um, whether you've made any progress in relation to the disparities between different demographic groups.
Okay, that makes sense. But in terms of actually achieving that true representation, what do you, how can they have this synergistic conversation to bring these disparities and that diverseness and bring it under one brand? Because
Mm.
at the end of the day, as much as you want diversity, as much as you want people with different perspectives, especially people who are representing your customer base, and be able to speak to how your customer base actually feel and create that lasting connection, you also want to have a unified brand, right? So how do you bring these diverse opinions into one synergistic conversation that will bring unity?
Good question. It's not easy, and I won't for a minute pretend that it is. But I think a lot of it stems from leadership. So, what does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to acknowledge the different perspective, different views, different experiences that can be beneficial when you're considering the kind of conversations that you talked about? And it's about looking outside yourself and looking towards purpose. You know, what is it that you want to achieve, and how best can you achieve that? So one of the things that we always advise organizations on is that you have to have a clear vision for for the type of organization that you're trying to build, and B, for the the experience that you want people to have when they engage with your organization, whether that be as an employee, or whether that be as a stakeholder or customer or service user, whatever it is that you're developing. And having that deliberate intention, that deliberate vision to say, this is what we want people's experience to be, regardless of whether they're white or black, or whether they're male or female. That should be your driving force. That should be your your ultimate direction of travel, to say, even if we're not there now, this is where we're going to. And having conversation that the level of conversation that you talked about is about molding your organization and transporting it to that vision that you've got of the future. So
Okay.
hopefully that does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
yeah, it does. It does because at the end of the day, it's the culture that the leadership commands that will stick, right? If the
Oh
leader
yeah.
does not
Yeah.
have the broad or at least being able to accept their own unconscious bias and say, I have this bias, and as a result of my bias, I know that I need X, Y, and Z to weigh into what I'm thinking about, right?
Yeah,
You know,
100%.
like I was reading a book From Good to Great,
Yeah.
and one of the things that the guy said in the book was that there was a board meeting, and then the chairman of the board said, "Oh, have we made a decision on this? And are we all in agreement on this?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Wonderful. Let's postpone it to next week until we all have something to say
Yeah.
against
Yeah.
this idea." You understand what I mean? I think that is where diversity needs to, or a variance of opinion needs to stem from the board
Yeah.
level. So in terms of bringing it back to startups, or making it focused on startups now, how can a startup or a founder build diversity by default? How can they lead that conversation about the diversity? Because they are more or less stepping into the position of leadership. So
Mm.
how can they? What are the steps, or what would you recommend that they do in order for them to start building these diversity blocks?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one because as a startup founder, you've got kind of so many things that are distracting you, so many things that are pulling for your attention.
Mhm.
But it's about being deliberate and being intentional about what it is that you're trying to do. Diversity and inclusion speaks to the sustainability of an organization. As individuals, we all have blind spots, but the way that we can manage those blind spots is to firstly be aware of them. So
Mhm.
understanding what is your starting point. So this is where we are today as an organization, whether that's one person, whether that's 5 people, 10 people, whatever it is. Understand where you are and where those blind spots or gaps are, and then be intentional about trying to close those gaps. So it may not be a case that you have to go out and hire a bunch of people that are diverse. You may not even have the budget or facilities to do that. But there are conversations that you can have, there are partnerships that you can make to say, okay, if we're an organization that is all black men, for example, there are other organizations that are all white women or all disabled individuals. What can we do in order to build relationships with external parties to add to what we're doing? So if we're developing an app, for example, can we test it with this group of individuals who we acknowledge are key to kind of what we're trying to do, but we don't have the ability to bring them on board formally. So let's consult with them, let's speak to them. It could be a quid pro quo arrangement in that they provide us some feedback, we provide them some feedback. I think one of the great things about startups is that you have that ability to be agile and you have that license potentially to ask for favors and to ask people to kind of contribute to what you're doing. Personally, I'm a big believer in mentorship. So I always look for mentors that have potentially a different life experience from me. So
Mhm.
um, looking for opportunities for people to question and challenge what I'm doing.
Mhm.
So even just having people to kind of bounce ideas off and question your line of thinking to make sure that you're on the right track, or is there certain things that you've not quite considered that you need to consider going forward. And yeah, I think the final thing that I'd say is just be willing to learn. I think that there's so much to learn in relation to people. I think people's this is one thing that people never say, but people are the biggest challenge for growing organizations. There's so many layers to people. Um, People often look at the financial side of being a startup, but I think if you can get the people element right, then everything else will kind of sort itself out. And
Indeed.
the people element is strongly hinged on diversity and inclusion, that they're intrinsically linked. So your ability to make people feel included in what you're doing um, will give you the sustainability that you need to thrive.
Amazing, amazing. And yourself as a founder, as a CEO, how has it been building a business from basically from the ground up? What's been your experience?
Oh, it's been stressful, man. It's been good, man. It's been really good. I've enjoyed it. Um, I've I've not slept for a very long time. Um, but no, it's been really good. I think it's especially in this area. I think the level of fulfillment that I've managed to get from this has been second to none. I've had the privilege of doing a lot of great things in life, um, but this is definitely up there. And it's challenging. I think for me, I'm always somebody that wants to be challenged, and this is probably the biggest challenge ever.
Amazing. And in terms of the future for equality, diversity and inclusion, what do you think the conversation is going to be like in maybe 5 years' time, or in 10 years' time, or in 20 years' time? Do you think it's going to be different from what we're having now, or do you think it would be a little bit more evolved and it's slightly different?
I sincerely hope that it will be different, because I don't want to be having the same level of conversation that we shouldn't be talking about. Should we pay men the same as women? Should we pay black people the same as white people? It's a redundant conversation. And should black people be on boards and should black people be in leadership? It's a stupid conversation. But we've got a lot of work to do to unpick kind of systemic oppression, systemic racism, understanding what the gaps are. I think as a society, we have to get ourselves out of the mindset of judging people based on arbitrary things. So where somebody went to university is absolutely redundant in the workplace. Where somebody used to work, again, is less relevant than who they are. What can they bring to the role? What can they actually do? That's the more important question. And I think societally as well, when we look at, again, without turning this into a political conversation, but when we look at people's competence, not just where they went to school, or whether they went to private school, or whether they went to Eton, whether they went to Cambridge or Oxford, we really need to judge people by what value they're adding to society. And if they're not adding value to society in a way that is meaningful, then we need to question their credentials in terms of leadership. And I think only when we get to that level will we be in a better position. And again, I think we'll drive the right incentives. And the incentives won't be about what can you put on your CV or what can you talk about doing. The incentives need to be tied to what can you actually do. And tying it to what you can actually do is inherently moving away from the arbitrary things in terms of, are you a man, are you a woman, are you black, are you white, are you part of the LGBT? All of that is redundant, or all of it becomes redundant when you start focusing on what really matters.
I think that should be where the conversation is driving, not that, oh, you need to have a woman in your workplace or you need to have a man in your
exactly.
workplace and so on. But it's more or less like driving the fact that these things are redundant requirements. It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is what I can do, right? What I can deliver, what I can contribute, the value I can add to your organization. And also speaking to that point, actually, because we then begin to look at, okay, the difference between are you really diversity? Are you really diverse if you are employing a black man that went to Cambridge, who also is from a middle class family? Would that person be a true reflection of their community, or is it going to be more of a social mobility conversation than a race conversation, for example, or for example, even a less able person who has had privilege may not have had the same experience as another less able person who, whether white or black or whatever, or female, that may not have had the same privilege. Is that where the conversation, should social mobility be one of the cornerstones of the diversity conversation?
100%. And we never look at things individually to say this is gender, this is ethnicity, this is disability. We as individuals don't work in vacuums. I can be all of those things, I can be none of those things. So for me, it's really about encouraging people to have more intersectional conversations, encouraging people to really look for the gaps, understand who is left out of this conversation, whose experiences have we not taken into account. And the further we go down the kind of the line of thinking, if it is very singular, the quicker we'll end up at kind of this intersectional approach to actually understand, once we get past the protected characteristics, what else do we have to consider? And by looking at that, what else, you get into a process of self-reflection. And again, as you said, all of those things should fall away in time, and it should just be about ensuring that we maintain this universal view of ensuring that we are encouraging people to be themselves, encouraging people to really work on the value that they can add as individual, and that is different for different people. It looks different in different circumstances, and we need to get to a position where we're creating environments whereby everybody can thrive, regardless of, you know, whether you've got kids or whether you're a carer or whether you're disabled. None of that should matter, and we should be focusing on the environment that we create that allows people to contribute the most value.
And be their best self.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But what about the positive discrimination that gets attached in this conversation? So, for example, when the BLM was really hot, then you had the All Lives Matter coming, and the All Lives Matter really meant White Lives Matter, right? So, what do you say about the positive discrimination? Why? Okay, as much as you're saying that you shouldn't be discriminated because you're a black person, then why am I now being discriminated because I'm white, right? So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so discrimination of all forms is illegal, and that goes for positive discrimination as well in this country. Positive action is permitted. So positive discrimination is saying that we're going to give this person something just because he's black. Positive action is in relation to recruitment and job applications. If you've got two candidates that are exactly the same in terms of capability, in terms of aptitude, you're allowed to favor a black person over a white person, or a female over a male, if you can demonstrate that there is a need for that in your organization. So, for example, if you're an organization of all white men, you may consider taking on board a woman, you may consider taking on board a person of color as a means to diversify. In relation to all lives matter, I think it is the most redundant statement, because saying that Black Lives Matter doesn't take anything away from all other lives. Similarly, I think there's a there's a particular mindset that says, oh, giving jobs to women, or giving jobs to black people, or giving jobs to ethnic minorities takes away jobs from white people. And actually what we're saying is that we want a level playing field whereby the best person for the job gets the job. But that isn't the case because of kind of systemic racism and all of these other unconscious or conscious things, barriers that prevent people from progressing. So, you know, looking at the way that recruitment agencies work, they have a list of candidates and they will pick out the names that are easiest to say. That in itself is a barrier. It's not to say that somebody with an atypical name isn't qualified for the job. It's just that we've introduced this element of human error, whereby humans decide based on their own preferences which candidates they're going to give an opportunity to. So there's always going to be detractors. There's always going to be people that think that they're losing something by other people being included. And for us as an organization, it's about reframing that conversation to say that actually everybody wins. If you can say that everybody genuinely has a positive experience, why isn't that something that you would aspire for?
Indeed. And just on the final note here, do you think that racism and all the isms that are out there, do you think that it really comes from, is really driven from a place of a genuine superiority complex, or do you feel it's driven from a place of, or from a survival mode mentality, or do you feel like it's something that is coming from something that has been enshrined and taught to people, like this is how you must see a black person, this is how you must see a disabled person, this is how you must see someone from the LGBTQ community, and so on and so forth? Do you think it's a natural tendency, or do you think it's something that it has been brought in by nurture?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I would say it's probably learned behavior more than anything. So, and the reason I say that is because when you've got kids and you kind of, you know, allow kids to play, they'll play with anyone. Like they really don't care. They've got absolutely no preconceptions of what people are like based on their gender or their skin color or anything. They see humans as humans. But over time, that gets eroded because society tells us, the education system tells us, law enforcement system tells us that you treat people a different way based on arbitrary characteristics such as their gender, such as their ethnicity, such as their religion to some extent. And the same way that it's taught, it can be untaught, if that's even a word. So, or retaught. You know, I think the onus is on us to start to teach future generations what equality, diversity, and inclusion really looks like, what it means. It should be the norm. It isn't the norm. It hasn't been the norm. And if we kind of look back into kind of deep history or even recent history, to be fair, it's been used as a tool of division. And I was listening to something the other day actually about kind of women's rights and the way that women entered the workforce. And I think we've romanticized it to some extent to say that men saw the light and you know, slowly let women into positions of power, and it's not the truth. You know, the World War II had World War One, even World War One and World War Two had a great part to play in that. A lot of the men were fighting, a lot of the men were dying, and they needed people to keep the economy going. And that's where I'll kind of make the link, and I don't want to kind of get lost because you can kind of go down rabbit holes, but you have to make the link between the preservation of capitalism and the preservation of some of these isms that we experience. So if we are as a society racist, inherently racist, we are less likely to care about what atrocities we are committing in the quote unquote third world. So the the Bangladeshi child that made your shirt, are you going to care about that child? Or are you going to care about that child if it means you have to pay double for that shirt? Or do you just want a nice shirt for like for a low price? And that's when we have to look to the isms to say the isms support capitalism. They support our comfortable way of life, because in order for us to eradicate and was to some extent removed and detached from the true manifestation of these isms. But if we were to draw that parallel to say, okay, if we truly care about all lives, if we truly feel that Black Lives Matter or Brown Lives Matter or all lives matter, that would dictate the way that we treat other people outside of our immediate context. So when we're talking about international relations in Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan, and parts of Africa where there's children mining for iPhone components. You know, if we really truly care about some of these things, we have to go the whole distance. We can't stop at how many women are on the board and you know, pay equality. We have to follow that supply chain. But I'll leave it there because I can probably talk about this forever, and I don't want it to get too like theoretical.
Yeah, that's fine. And I really appreciate you sharing your experience, Mark. I think what you said is very insightful, and you know, you guys, you've heard it all from Mark himself. You know, the most important thing as a startup, as a startup founder, is that you need to be considered. It's not about, like Mark has said, it's not about employing people to be a face in the business. It's not about who works in your organization. It's about how you make decisions and how you treat people. How you connect with your customers. And as we are building a business as a startup, where you're building a business that will be a major disruptor and become a multinational organization in the future. For your business to survive, for your business to thrive, you would only succeed based on how you make other people feel, based on the connections that you're building with other people. That's the success is based on relationships. Nobody cares about the quality of what you're providing. That's good. That will make them buy it, but that might not make them stick with your brand. So it's all about making sure that fundamentally you're not just doing a command and control of decision making, even though it's almost a default way of thinking for founders because you're thinking about having a stringent budget. There are a lot of things that you're thinking about, and you're always kind of like, you know what, just go and do it because I've asked you to do it, type of mindset. But you need to make sure that in order for you to build a sustainable business, in order for you to build a business that will be spoken about in future, there needs to be a diverse opinion. There needs to be it needs to be driven by real conversations and by real connections with people. So please take the advice that Mark has given. If you don't have the resources, start looking for organizations that you can partner with that can be a true reflection of the stakeholders, especially your customers that you're relating to. Because if you don't have those connections, then you probably wouldn't have the business either. So until the next, thank you very much for spending time with us. Until the next season of the startups, see you soon.
Thank you for watching today's episode of the Startups. It is my hope that has been both inspiring and insightful. Here at the Startups, we are committed to helping you to build successful and sustainable businesses that will provide the jobs for the future. This is why we are proud of our partnership with the Business Enablement Tool. It is a digital business consultant that helps you provide the ongoing support that you need to build a successful business. We're also committed to helping you to raise the capital that you need to actually take the first step to start your business. And that is why we are proud of our partnership with Transit Loan and the government-backed startup loan to help you to raise up to £25,000 in startup capital. For more information on this, please see the description below. To stay connected with us, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Please also hit the notification icon, the bell, so that you can always get notified once a new startup show comes out. Till next time, see you next week.